Good evening, and thank you everyone for coming to our talk here at the Center for Contemporary Printmaking. We're here in Matthews Park in Norwalk, and the Center for Contemporary Printmaking is a 29-year-old art organization focused on specifically printmaking within the world of art. We have galleries that we're in today. We have studio spaces for artists to come and use our equipment and facilities. We have workshops where we teach people about different printmaking processes. We also have an artist in residence program, and that is what we're here for tonight. So everyone here, as well as online, are joining us to learn about our current artist in residence, Bryn Sumner. Bryn is here with us from not too far away. They're here from Brooklyn. But Bryn has been trained as a printmaker with a degree from the printmaking program at the University of Iowa. And then Bryn continued on with a printmaking program at the Tamarind Institute in New Mexico. So we're thrilled to have them here and looking forward to hear about the project that they've been working on for the last week and a half while they've been here. So I will turn it over to Bryn and let you present.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everyone. So I'm going to be talking to you about this project that you see on the table over here. I'm working on a pair of 12 by 18 copper etchings, and this is the first one. All three of these prints that you see are different states of the same plate. So there was a print pulled from the original line work. I made edits, and then those are subsequent days of work that you see. So I have been working with the image of the trail marker rock cairn for a couple years. I first got interested in it during my 2021 summer through hike of the Colorado Trail, which is a 486-mile trail that runs from Denver, Colorado, just outside of Denver, Colorado, to Durango. And I did it over about 5.5 weeks. Started with a friend for the first week, who's a longtime hiking buddy of mine, who only could take off a couple weeks from work. So the plan was for me to continue on after that. And I kept a trail journal as I went, thinking, okay, it's worth carrying the extra weight if I could make a sketch like maybe once a week. And I actually did more than that, and I ended up doing a fair amount of writing as well. Started out just like I'd have a date in the journal, and it would be, Sam and I left, we went through Waterton Canyon, we saw bighorn sheep climbing the rocks on our very first day, and they walked right across the path in front of us. And it would be kind of a report on the day. And then as I went on, the first week we made it to Breckenridge, Colorado, and Sam left for New York, and I continued on towards Twin Lakes, was the next leg of the journey. And as I started spending more time by myself and with my own thoughts, the journal kind of changed. It was less of a report of like the things that I saw and the places that we'd gone through, and more about what was going on in my own head. It was kind of a deepening into, okay, we're in the rhythm of walking, and I think this is true of a lot of people who through hike. The further you go into that experience, the more it's less about what you're seeing and more about maybe a mileage goal or the things that you're sorting through, because I think a lot of people take off on a long hike like this with kind of there's some reason, it might be like you're changing jobs or you're trying to make a big life shift or a big life decision, sort through something traumatic that may have happened. And so there's a lot of time spent with yourself and a lot of getting to know yourself through that experience. And the journal became more about that. And I wish that I could tell you that the more internal entries towards the middle of the trail were all like amazing realizations about the meaning of life, but a lot of them were like, some other hiker said something that I thought was mean and dismissive and out of line. But this woman I met one day, and there's like 2 pages of the journal devoted to this conversation, had given me some unsolicited advice that I didn't appreciate. But the really frustrating thing was that she was also faster than me. And so all of the rebuttals would never reach her because she passed me on the trail later that day and was never seen or heard from again. But it was a nice exercise to put those thoughts and feelings somewhere and let go of them so that you could move on with this experience. And then as I started to get towards the end of the trail and had spent some of that time figuring out, like, why am I on this trail? What are the things and the people that I miss at home? And I was surprised by some of those things. I started really thinking about, like, we're getting close to the end, and what do I want from my life when I get back? And unsurprising to any of the printmakers in the room, one of those things was I really, really, really miss the Robert Blackburn printmaking workshop in New York City, where I've printed my work for 10 years now. And I started to think about making etchings and lithographs. And this was right around the time that I was getting into the southern part of the trail. Approaching Durango goes through the San Juan Mountains, which is a beautiful area of high desert hiking. It sort of changes. There was a more wooded part a little bit earlier than that. And there's a lot of above tree line hiking. And when the trail is above tree line, you can't mark with blazes on the trees. So they'll mark the trail with these big cairns, which are, they're directional markers. They help you see where the trail is going, and if you have to leave the trail to, take care of business, some other reason, or to camp, you can find the trail and people won't get lost. So it's for your safety, but also to make sure that people aren't wandering off the trail and damaging the environment. It's important in these backcountry areas to stay in the little highway that's meant for humans so that we have minimal impact. And I really loved the cairns just as kind of sculptural objects as well. And these 3 photos were taken, 3 of like 100 that I took this day when the trail crosses over the headwaters of the Rio Grande River. And the headwaters of the Rio Grande River are a trickle. It's tiny. There was a hiker with us that day who was from Texas, and she had to get a photo because she lives near the bottom of the Rio Grande of what the top of the river looked like. So I finished the trail. I got home, and as planned, I started drawing cairns from the photos that I'd been taking. This is a small graphite drawing, like this big, the first one that I made. And I was using like a traditional drawing pencil, but also a very sharp mechanical pencil. And that mechanical pencil line kind of reminded me of the marks that you get when you're doing a hard ground etching. So I started doing these pencil studies kind of with the intention of translating it over to copper. And these are my first 2 copper plates. These are about 8 inches tall, from cairns that you saw 2 slides ago. It's the middle and the left. These are shaped plates. I learned to use a jeweler's saw and cut them out because I like the idea of having the cairn just be this still life object that exists out of context. It feels to me a little bit like when you draw on the whole landscape, I always find that the drawing of the landscape is a little disappointing compared to what it was like to actually be there. And it didn't hold my interest for too long to do traditional landscape work. But the cairn was like an object that it's sort of on the scale of a human body. They feel like kind of anthropomorphic characters that you meet along the way. And it's something that I can really feel like I can wrap my mind around in a drawing. So I've been working with them as kind of still life objects. These are a couple more graphite drawings from a trip that I took to Kayaköy, Turkey in October of last year. These are architectural features from a ghost town. It was, the people were forced out at the end of the Greco-Turkish War due to being part of a minority religious community. And in these drawings, I started to look at the idea of a shadow being an action line through the drawing. So when I came back to the cairns, I started sort of seeking out things that had some sort of movement to them. I took a trip, when I got invited on this residency, planned a trip up to the White Mountains, New Hampshire, to take all fresh reference photos for this project. Because the Colorado ones, they're on my iPhone, because that's all I had, and were taken without really a specific purpose in mind at that point. And it was nice to go on a hike that was really a photo trip and like bring a big camera and take the time to photograph the cairns from a bunch of different angles and think about light and space and motion. Sam and I, this is the same friend who started the Colorado Trail with me, came on this adventure. We were planning to do the entire presidential traverse from north to south in the White Mountain National Forest. We got only halfway through to Mount Washington because we had a thunderstorm come in on the day that we had planned to do the lower elevation peaks towards the southern end. But we had the, this is Sam in the background checking the signs, and we have a thunderstorm kind of out of the frame. The constant tension was that a lot of times the lighting for photography is really exciting right on the edge of bad weather or early in the morning or late in the day. And so I was always kind of pushing the envelope as far as we're above tree line and we're starting to hear thunder. And so it was good to have a friend there who didn't really care about what I was seeing through the viewfinder of the camera and really was there to get us to shelter on time. And so I really appreciate them for that and all the other support that they gave. So we ended up during that thunderstorm taking shelter at AMC's Lake of the Clouds hut. The Appalachian Mountain Club runs this whole high mountain hut system, and you can stay there for a night and get a bunk, and they feed you and they sing you songs. It's run mostly by like recent college grads or people who are between taking a gap year, and was really fun. It was like summer camp in the middle of a thunderstorm in this lodge. So we were very well taken care of, thankfully, that night. I like that when you move the camera just a little bit, there's such complex objects that you get a whole different composition, especially if you're looking like I am for shapes of value. I think the reason that I started drawing that in part is the way that etching works is that you're biting things sequentially, usually from light to dark. So when I did the line work here, it was all drawn out. And then I dipped the plate in acid for 15 minutes, brought it back out, stopped out and protected the line work that needed to stay really light, and then put it in for subsequent dips for the lines that I wanted to deepen and widen, and therefore hold more ink and appear darker. So because you have to kind of structure it that way where you're thinking, how do I divide up light values, middle values, darker values for the line edge, and then also for the aquatint, light, middle. I did actually 5 different tones in that. You start thinking about the shapes of those stop out areas that you're going to have to approach. And so I'm looking at the reference photos also that way of like, okay, how much do we have like a deep, deep dark, and what does that shape make, and how does it lead you through the image? And that can change a lot just from a small shift of the camera. So in the White Mountains, we were there in early June, and there's a ton of really cool high alpine vegetation that is very delicate, because above tree line, there's not a lot of wildlife up there, and the wind is very strong and the sun is very strong. So the vegetation has to adapt to be resilient to those weather conditions, but it doesn't really have to evolve to, be resilient to a deer's footfall. So they're quite delicate, and a plant like this could take 100, 200 years to get that big. They grow very slowly and very low to the ground, and you can really kill off a large section of it in an instant if you step on it. So it's very important part of the function of the cairns, making it very clear where the trail is through this area, is so that we have footfalls only in a narrow path, and we can keep this habitat for all of this delicate vegetation like the diapensia that was blooming while we were there in early June. So I've talked a little bit about the types of visuals that excite me as far as sorting through my hundreds and hundreds of photos that I took. And then I want to show you also some artists that I've been looking at that are playing with elements that I think are interesting to think about with relation to beautiful piles of rocks. Toru Watari is a non-traditional ikebana artist, so Japanese flower arranging traditionally, but he has a very contemporary take on it, where he's balancing all kinds of things. And I love the play that he has with surprising scale shifts and negative space that makes it an interesting line. I think is great. He likes finding oddly shaped vegetables also and balancing them. I got to see Via Selmans' show Winter at Matthew Marks Gallery this past January or February. Really stunning. This is a mezzotint that is it's like 2 inches shorter than the plates that I'm working on, so about the same scale. And I love the quiet of her work. I love that she can do a lot with a very limited color palette. It's a lot of like drama of cool gray versus warm gray, which I really love. And she has an attentiveness to each of the whole show Winter was snowflake imagery. And it's so clear. She's also done mezzotints of stars. And it's so clear that you look at this and it's snowflakes, and it could be nothing else because of the way that the snow clumps. And I just love the attentiveness to each individual snowflake is an individual in her work. I've also been looking at Sol LeWitt, which might feel like a little bit left field because I do very representational work, and he would talk about his work as being neither representational nor abstract, but just the actual thing, because his subject matter was line, and the line is a literal line. It's the most real that it could possibly be. This is a suite of etchings done at Crown Point Press, so similar printing process to what I was doing. And what I love about his work is his commitment to just the hand-drawn line always. In these color studies that are very systematic, there's a lot of soulfulness, I think, in the fact that the parallel lines, when you see them in person or can get a really good reproduction, you can see in this one that it's actually the same plate printed both ways, because there's a little bit of character where the line didn't meet the end here, and you see it in the red plate also. And I love that it's just such a pure love of that mark that you get in etching, which I really appreciate. So the process, if any of you are unfamiliar, this is what the tool looks like. I'm drawing on beautiful, beautiful hard grounds prepared by Liz Banish, and if you're an etcher, you're going to be impressed. She mailed them to me from here to Brooklyn, and they survived that trip quite well. There was a little scuffing on an area that was going to be bare white plate anyway, so I was impressed. So you're drawing with the tip of a needle, basically, and I approach breaking down this composition with, I have a standard mark texture that I'm going to use for the dark values, and then a different pattern that I use to put in the next lightest and then the next lightest. So there is a systematic way of processing it, which kind of, I find it very relaxing to sort of begin with a plan like that, because then I can just really, I can explore the shape of the object that I saw in person, and the photo is really just a reminder of what I experienced in 3 dimensions. I like trying to use the active mark of the cross-hatching to give a sense that it's an uneven surface and a bunch of planes kind of meeting each other. Because the tool is so small, I kind of feel like I'm a very small, like a bug, an ant walking across the surface. And I find the process of drawing this way very calming. I've been told by people who look at them that looking at them can be calming also, and I think that's really, it's a measure of success, I think, for the work, if that energy that I am embedding in the drawing comes through to the viewer. The final step on this is to add the aquatint layer, which is a finely ground rosin dust that's heat fused to the plate to protect basically a random organic dot pattern that you can bite then and get gradations of tones. No worries. So this is a step test, which you can see and handle if you like in person over there, that shows the different values that were applied over the line work. So there's a 45-second bite, minute 30, 3-minute, 6-minute, and there wasn't a 12 actually, but an 11 for the darkest darks. And then you can see here also the difference between a 45-minute line, and this is a 10-minute line and a 5-minute line. So you can see it was this mark drawn the same. There's another layer of decision making and depth and interest that you can add to the drawing in the choices that you make in biting the plate. So that's kind of an overview of what I've been up to. I'm happy to answer whatever types of questions, conceptual questions, nerdy technical questions. We love all the questions. Hi. Hi. Great question. So I actually made, not a mistake, but a decision that I decided to reverse in here. I had drawn in, I thought maybe I wanted to give a little bit of an indication of the horizon at first, and so I put in a guideline. I decided not to actually etch that in the acid bath, so it was just a burr that was raised on the copper from the sharp tool going across it. So it's pretty easy to scrape out, but there's a tool called a scraper, which is has kind of a sharp edge on it, and you can knock off that little bit of copper burr that was raised above the surface and is holding ink. And then there's a burnisher, which is to rub it down. I used also a little bit of 3000 grit sandpaper is really good, and then Putz pomade, which is like a jeweler's rouge that you can rub in with a rag. So basically you have to physically polish it back out. And if you get it back to a shiny surface, then it'll print white again. So it is something like that you can work back and forth, but it takes some effort, and it's better to keep the edits to a minimum unless you want to really wear out your arm. Yeah.
Right, sorry, I came a little bit late, but could you go over the dipping again for me? How you dip?
Yeah. So.
And that's your that's what creates your scale.
Yeah. So let me go back to. I was saying so the etching is nice. Before they invented the process of biting plates with acid, a lot of people were doing engraving, which requires physically cutting the line into the plate. And it's a little slower, and the mark that you get, there's a resistance that if you look at old engravings, it's a lot of straight and like slow curves. And with etching, you can move the tool like there's a lot of freedom and looseness that comes from not having to press into the plate to make your line. So basically you're just pressing hard enough to make a cut through the protective ground, which is all over the plate to protect the areas from the acid that you don't want to bite. So I'm making the drawing, and then it goes into, we say colloquially, we call it an acid bath. It's really a corrosive salt ferric chloride that's doing the biting. And that will do the removal of the material out of that line. And the longer you leave it in there, the more material it removes. So it'll remove material with depth and also with width. So you can see here a wider, deeper line printed with a 45-minute dip in the acid bath compared to a 10-minute, compared to a 5-minute. Yeah.
So the important, when you do that, you have to block out everything else. How did you keep those lines and then
the white dots is a thing that I had seen it, heard of it done before, but not a lot of people in my shop are using that. It's a you can use either a litho crayon or a China marker, and Chris recommended using actually a white China marker on the plate, which means that you don't have to do the like mental flip of like, am I drawing highlights or dark? So you draw it and it looks like highlights on the plate to do it with the white. So the China marker is a way of stopping it out. So that was done before any of the biting to save the white. So all the way down that stripe, a little bit of, yeah.
You're using the needle to make these marks. Are you pressing really hard? Or
no, really light, just enough to cut through this asphaltum-based ground. It's just painted over with a little bit of an acid protectant. Yeah, you can see here, this photo on the left, all of this dark area is the protective ground. And then you see the bare copper where the needle just scratched through, just the very top layer. Yeah, you'll see that my favorite etching needle, I drilled through a champagne cork and made myself a little handle. It's just like kind of nice if you're holding it for a long time to have a little chunkier thing in your hand and not have your finger collapsing on it all the time. Wear out your death grip. It's like keeping a loose grip on the needle is something that I have to remind myself to do all the time, because I tend to be, when I write with a pencil, I've always been kind of like a hard pressing, heavy handed person, and this really teaches you to have a light hand. Yeah, of course.
what made you choose the Colorado?
Kind of timing and length. Yeah, it's nice to do during the summer and be away long enough that I work as a dog walker as my day job. I've been doing that for about 8 years in Brooklyn. And I'm self-employed, so I kind of get to call the shots, but I don't want to go away for so long that people forget that I'm their favorite dog walker and that I come back and I don't have a job. So it seemed like just the right amount of time that like I really wanted what felt like a big adventure to me, more than just like 2 weeks. But keeping it under 2 months meant that I could come back to the life that I've built in Brooklyn that I really love, and all of my good dogs and all of my friends. Yeah.
So let's say you have a drawing that you really love and you want to get that, you don't want to reinvent it. Does that ever happen, or do you always start from scratch on the project?
I've kind of begun to think of the photo taking process as my prep work, because there I can, because I love doing these printmaking processes that are like long duration, high level of investment of time before you get anything on paper. I can try out a lot of compositions in photography really quickly, and I print out my reference photos. I'll print them just like on a black and white laser printer and cut them and tile them so that I can see it at scale. Especially when I'm drawing larger, it's helpful to test out a composition at the scale that it's really going to be, to make sure that you're kind of positioning things where you want them to be.
So you draw from the
And I do a side-by-side kind of, yeah, I have the reference photo, all that tiled. I didn't bring them over, but they're hanging up in the cottage, and that'll be kind of protecting part of the plate, so I'm not getting my dirty little hands on it, and just seeing like kind of side-by-side what I'm doing. Yeah.
Also, you might mention the white lines on the plate.
Oh, the white lines on the plate are, that's the Serral transfer paper. So I can put guidelines onto the top of the hard ground for where I want to draw, or just key information, and I'm not committed to that line until I touch it with the needle. So that's just like transfer paper you get on a roll, and flip it over. You can put a drawing or whatever reference on it and trace onto the plate some information. Serral transfer paper. Yeah. Liz likes the yellow kind, and I like the white kind, and both are great.
So with this process, are you limited in scale of what you can accomplish with it? This is a pure etching?
Yeah, this is the biggest I've gone so far. You can certainly go at least twice as big, and I have seen there's the guy who was at Art Print Residence in Barcelona recently was posting on Instagram this plate that's like, yeah, if you have a big enough acid bath to accommodate it and a big enough press, you know, go to town. I have actually. I was doing some work right before I came here, smaller scale tests from images from the Turkish ghost town. And it's in its initial infancy, and we'll see if the color works out. Yeah. I've done in the past some color mezzotint, of like 2 or 3 colors, but still kind of within a quiet palette. I try sometimes branching into bright color, and I'll show it. I live in an amazing live-work studio, like co-op house in Brooklyn. There's 12 studios, and I'll like put the prints out for my roommates, and they'll be like, well, the color's nice, but really like it in black and white. This just happened to me like 2 weeks ago before I came. So I'm trying to figure out how to make it work for me. Yeah.
So I was thinking about your training in lithography
Uh-huh.
On a stone.
Yeah.
And that these are stones on a different type of surface. Do you ever consider, or have you
Drawn rocks on rocks? Yeah, I have 3 traveling litho stones, and I brought them with me just in case I had a break where I needed to wait for something to happen with this, and I wanted to work on that project. This has kept me so busy that I haven't really started on those, but yes, that's the project for when I get home. They're like little 35-pound stones. I built for one of them a crate lined with ethafoam that goes in a backpack, and I drag it to the print shop and back home to Brooklyn on the subway, And just this summer, commissioned my friend who's a woodworker to build me 2 little briefcases. So now I can do a really unhinged thing, which is carry all 115 pounds of them at once. And I did try that out, and it works great.
I have an additional question.
Please.
So you mentioned that your approach to the different gradations of tone for the plate had a different sort of pattern in mind for each area. What is the difference then in the way you work on stone, like as a lithograph? How do you approach those? Is it
Well, I haven't done it yet, so, but I have a plan, which is I want to try out some touche washes for texture, and I think it'll be cool. So stay tuned.
Could you explain the mezzotint again?
Yeah, I was at that point working pretty small. I have a mezzotint rocker that's like about this wide, and then you have to just like go back and forth for a couple of hours and rock the plate. It creates a burr texture on the top of the plate, and that's something that you can burnish back. It looks at the start like a really, really deep aquatint, but it's information that's raised above the surface rather than recessed into the surface, and burnishes really delicately, and you can get a lovely soft mark with very little effort because you're just pushing down or scraping off this little bit of copper burr on the top. Does that answer the question? Okay. No, not in these. I was just saying the color work I've done in Intelio before has been mezzotint based and very small scale. Yeah.
Technique also, so the mezzotint versus the bit, did you say, or pipe?
The bite, that just refers to the process of putting it in the acid to have the acid do the work of removing the copper from the areas that need to be recessed.
You're thinking etching to mezzotint, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, like what's easier, what's harder is more like what type of personality are you and what types of tasks do you enjoy. Some people find graining stones in lithography to be really tedious. I love it. You love it. We love the sound that it makes. We love beveling the edges of plates, you know, and then some people just like don't like that kind of stuff, and they're, you know, more into monotype or whatever other type of printmaking process appeals to the type of marks that they want to make and the speed that they want to be able to produce things.
So mezzotint effect would be different from the,
It would look a little bit different than this.
you'd
Yeah.
be able to tell the difference,
Usually.
but only trained eye.
Yeah, you look at a lot of prints, you get used to guessing how people did things. Printmakers get kind of a bad rap for like, you have a critique group full of printmakers, they start asking all the like really gritty technical questions before they even really look at what the image is. Have been guilty of that on occasion.
Also, I have a book upstairs by Carol Lentz, who
Yes.
has literally written the book on mezzotint printmaking. They're stunning, but it is a very time-consuming, laborious process just to prepare the surface of the plate to rub it to get the first texture, and then it's like a reverse process. You take out the areas you don't want to have color.
Yeah, you polish whites out of a dark, basically, usually.
Why is it so hard?
It just takes a long time to prepare the plate, for, like, because you start with a blank plate usually to prepare the plate to the black, but you usually are starting with a fully black plate or black in the area where you want to work the mezzotint and then going white. But the drawing process is, I would say, faster than etching because you don't have to wait for the bite time. You just start polishing and working the surface. So it's like it's patient in the prep, but I think it's really fun and fast in the drawing stage.
Carol Wax is coming here to teach a workshop.
Is she really?
How
Good to
many-
know.
How many prints can you pull from a mezzotint?
It does break down a little faster than the etching plate. It depends how many times you proofed it. I don't know, like
Depends if you steal face it.
Depends if you steal a face. The answer is, it depends.
10. So it's a bear 10, I'm sure. But the first one and the second one are different. Same with an aquatin.
The first aquatin's probably, yeah, I'm guessing that probably the subsequent proofs are going to be a little bit lighter on the aquatin, which is desirable for me. I did it a little on the heavy side, hoping that I can maybe modify the ink and the wiping, and as the plate settles in, that I'll get a little bit less intense darks in the midtones. We'll see how it settles in.
So the aquatin, is there another way to do it to not have to put it in a rosin?
Yeah, you can do a spray print or spray paint. Like, yeah, a lot of people do a spray aquatin, which can get a similar effect, and then you can do other things. You know, you can do a coarser texture on purpose for an expressive reason. Yeah, both fun to play with.
Just not as soft.
Just
not as soft.
They just have a little bit of a different look. I like the rosin for this.
You didn't cut this one out.
No, I kind of liked having the plate mark and the bare plate when I proofed it like that. You know, that I brought my saw with me in case I wanted to, and I don't know. What do you think? I think the plate mark adds it, especially because it's kind of asymmetrical. I like the way the plate mark activates that negative space around it right now. We'll see if I change my mind.
Are you building towards a show?
I would love to be. You know, I just had 2 artists come by the cottage today, Jane Cooper and Frances Ashworth, who are both doing cairn imagery. So we're talking about how maybe we should have a 3-person group show about piles of rocks. So maybe, stay tuned again.
I can see you going really big with these, actually. I keep seeing them, and I keep seeing them like on a wall, like a big, huge.
I think it would be fun to go really big with them. It definitely, like, doubling the height and doubling the width has presented a few challenges. I definitely decided that I needed to think about more nuance, and I usually don't do this many stages of gradation of aquatint, and I usually don't step bite my line work either. But as it got bigger and the size of the mark stays the same, then you have to think about, like, how do I deal with that discrepancy? So yeah, scaling up more will present other decisions. Yeah.
Are you here for the rest of the, where are we?
The rest of the week, yeah, I'll be leaving at the end of the week. Yeah. I know. Thank you so much. Liz and Chris have been wonderful in helping me sort through my technical difficulties, which is an inherent part of loving printmaking, is loving technical difficulties. And it's really rewarding when you get to the other side of them. And it's been lovely being here and getting to know this other community of printmakers. Immediately you walk into the shop and you have a lot in common with everyone, and finding out who our mutual friends are, because really it's not that far to New York City, has been so fun, and the cottage is laid out really nicely for work and living. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.